What's a city without a bustling market? Vendors shouting, cars rolling, and tables filled with goods. It's the perfect place for deals or danger. Today, we're bringing that atmosphere to life with miniature market stalls, cards, and accessories. Perfect for D&D, Mordheim, or any fantasy setting. Stay with me as I dive into the crafting process step by step. And stick around for some easy tricks that make your market feel truly alive.
Hey crafters, welcome back to HANDCRAFTED. Today, we're bringing life to our modular city by building a bustling market with stalls, cars, tables, and more. A city isn't just buildings and streets. It needs people, trade, and all the little details that make it feel alive. So let's grab some materials and start crafting.
Alright, let's make some market stalls. The first thing I did was to cut several XPS foam strips. I made two sizes, 4 and 5 centimeters. Even though I cut first and textured afterward, I recommend doing it the other way around, as it makes the process easier. For texture, I simply used a ballpoint pen to draw lines on the pieces. Then, with an aluminum bristle brush, I made light strokes to create a bit more wood grain. Do this on all sides. Now let's check my stash of wooden pieces for the countertop. The best option is Jenga pieces, as they add weight and stability to the structure. I glued two of them together with some PVA glue and let them dry for a while using clamps to apply pressure. Once dry, I covered the front with a couple of coffee stirrers. The first time I used PVA glue, but I recommend using hot glue instead. After doing the rest this way, I find it much more convenient. By the way, these stirrers should stick out a few millimeters on each side of the Jenga pieces. You can trim them after gluing with cutting pliers, so you don't even have to measure. Now let's cut some small foam pieces for the wooden boards. We will use the same texturing technique as before, but here I will try drawing some wood knots to add a bit more character. Again, lightly brush in the direction of the lines drawn with the pen. Finally, glue them onto the Jenga pieces, and again, hot glue works best here. Now for the pillars, the excess coffee stirrers pieces serve as anchors, fitting into the foam strip to create a stronger bond. I press the foam strip into place to leave a small mark. Then, use the knife or a modeling blade to hollow out the area slightly. We also need to trim a bit the countertop, creating a small indentation to accommodate the pillar. Once all the pillars are ready and the countertop is trimmed, we glue them in place with hot glue. We will attach the long strips at the back and the short ones at the front. This will create the correct roof angle, which we will see in a moment. Once everything is glued, you can flip the piece over and run a knife gently along the edges to remove any excess foam. Great, now the basic structure is done. All that's left is the roof. Using the tip of the hot glue gun, I made small grooves at the top of the pillars. You can use a knife instead, but this method is faster and easier. Then I glued some small round wooden sticks in place using the same glue. This will be the frame that supports the roof, which we will now make using coffee stirrers. Cut several to the desired length using cutting pliers. Then sand the edges with a hobby file. If you want, you can trim the edges with a modeling blade to give a more worn out look, but in my case I will leave them as they are. Now we just need to glue the boards in place. I did this in 2 or 3 steps, as the glue cooled too quickly to do the whole roof in one go. Once all the boards are attached, these two market stalls are complete. Now let's move on to some larger and more complex stalls. This will eventually have a canopy on the top, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. Using the same technique of gluing two Jenga pieces together, we will create a corner counter and a U-shaped counter using 2 and 3 sets of pairs. This joint is quite fragile, but don't worry, we will reinforce everything shortly. Just wait about 20 minutes for the glue to set properly. Now we will use coffee stirrers again to cover the counters. This not only adds decoration but also holds all the pieces together, creating incredibly sturdy joints. I glued them with hot glue and trimmed them with pliers once the glue had cooled. I did this for all sides except the interior ones. Once finished, I lightly sanded the edges to smooth them out. Great, now it's time to add vertical pieces. We will place them at all the corners to hide the joints, and also in the central areas to add extra detail. Once this piece is complete, we will do the same for the U-shaped one. If you have any glue strings left, you can pull them off or carefully burn them with a lighter. But be careful not to burn anything else. Alright, this is starting to take shape. Now onto the upper panels. We will make them from multiple pieces, as I think it looks much more realistic than cutting them from a single sheet. Plus, it's easier. I measured and cut them by eye, just making sure they were large enough to stick out a little. We will apply texture the same way as before, lines with a ballpoint pen and grain with the aluminum bristle brush. Then we will glue all the pieces in place using hot glue. Press down firmly so the pieces settle properly. If any of the coffee stirrers stick out a little, they will sink into the foam, so be sure to press extra hard where the stirrers meet to keep the surface nice and flat. Alright, now for the upper structures. For this, I used the same foam strips and the same texturing techniques we've been using all along. And I will be honest, I completely improvised this, so it's probably not the most efficient way to do it. I recommend thinking things through a bit more than I did before diving in. For the joints, I use hot glue and pins throughout. Since foam is a bit fragile, inserting pins and cut them flush creates a much stronger and more durable bond. Make sure to push the pin in well after cutting it, so that you don't accidentally scratch yourself later. We will glue these structures directly onto the counter with hot glue. When handling these pieces, always grab them from the bottom to avoid any accidents. We will keep going with the process, building these structures that will eventually support the canopies. At some point, I realized the beam should stick out, so to fix this, I cut several short pieces of foam strip. I used a pen to shape them into the cross-section of a log, as if the beam had been cut straight from a tree. Finally, I glued all the pieces in their correct places. With that, these two pieces are finished. Now let's move on to a few more stalls to add even more variety to our set. Alright, let's make another type of stall. This time we will start with a couple of foam strips, adding grooves with the tip of the hot glue gun. Next, we will glue coffee stirrers between them to create a wall. To make the pieces sturdier, we will glue a vertical coffee stirrer. This will help keep everything in place while also serving as a decorative element. Now we will create a counter using the same techniques you've seen before. Then we will glue some columns, carving small grooves into them so they fit snugly against the corners of the Jenga pieces. The only thing left is to connect the back wall to the counter using two beams. This time I made sure they extended beyond the edges, so I wouldn't have to glue small foam bits later on. Once again, we will use the pin technique to create stronger joints. We will also glue small pieces on the sides to complete the structure that will support the canopy. Finally, we will attach the top panel with a bit more hot glue, and that's it! With this, I think you have now plenty of examples. You don't have to copy them exactly. Let your imagination run wild and create a unique market.
Alright, these stalls are looking great, but we need accessories to make it feel alive. I'm talking about tables, cars, display stands, and all the little props that make the space feel living. Before we jump in, a quick reminder. If you want to support the channel, check out my Patreon, where I share exclusive templates, behind-the-scenes content, and extra crafting resources. And if you need crafting materials, I've got Amazon links in the description. Using them helps support the channel at no extra cost for you. Now, let's get back to work.
Now I'm making a piece entirely inspired by Broken Terrain's market video. I highly recommend watching it for inspiration. There are so many interesting ideas. I did some freehand cutting to try to recreate meat pieces. I also made a few slices to represent pre-cut sticks. Then I used a toothpick as a bone and added some texture directly with a ballpoint pen. Luckily, I had a small knife-shaped piece that I bought on AliExpress, so I didn't have to craft one myself. Next, I put together a couple of tables using foam, a wooden strip and some coffee stirrers. I decided not to glue anything down since I prefer painting everything separately first. So when we get to painting stage, you will see how I arrange everything. Let's keep going. We will also make some crates using foam and coffee stirrers. As you can see, the process is always the same, gluing pieces together with hot glue and creating objects. For the dividers, we will cut some of the stirrers in half, and that's it. Since I wanted this crate to be tilted, I cut a small foam piece at an angle to create a sort of triangular shape. We add wood texture using the ballpoint pen and brush. Then glue it to the crate we just built. I also added a couple of screws to give it some weight and make it more stable. Using the same techniques as for one of the market stalls, I created a small wall using coffee stirrers. This time, however, I didn't extend it all the way to the bottom. I angled the foam strips using a meter box and added a couple more pieces to form a support. This will be a weapon display, but we will attach the weapons after painting everything in a wood color. By the way, the legs felt a bit flimsy, so I glued some additional wood pieces to strengthen the entire structure. With this done, let's move on to the next pieces. Alright, let's make a couple of wheelbarrows. This time I'm using much thinner stirrers, but the concept remains the same. We'll wrap the foam with coffee stirrers using hot glue for the joints. For the wheels, I used a homemade jig made of cardboard and a nail to cut a foam cylinder. Then I slice it into thin rounds to create the wheels. We place them on an axle and that's it. But wait, I forgot to add texture. For the larger wheelbarrow I'm making, I glued a wooden strip to reinforce the wheels. We attach the axles to the cars and now they are complete. But we can still add a bit more detail. Using a small adhesive jewel, we can create a little embellishment where the axle will go. I haven't shown much of how I build the longer wheelbarrow, but I think you can get the idea, since I'm using the same techniques over and over.
With everything built, it's time to paint. I will be using a variety of colors to make each stall feel unique. After all, no market should look too uniform. If you're enjoying the video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe. Also, I want to know, what's the coolest market stall idea you will add to your game? Drop a comment with your answer down below. Now let's grab some brushes and bring these pieces to life.
Perfect, let's prime everything with a mix of black acrylic paint and PVA glue. This will strengthen the pieces and provide a solid base for painting. First, we will cover everything with a good layer of dark brown. It's fine if some black remains visible in the deeper crevices, but we're aiming for a 90% coverage. We will do this for all the wooden pieces and wait for them to dry completely. Great, now we will apply a light overbrush of medium brown. It's important to emphasize that in areas with wood grain lines, the brush strokes should be perpendicular to these lines. This will highlight the shapes and textures we've created, achieving a much more realistic effect. Finally, using a soft brush, in my case a cheap makeup brush, we will apply a foam dry brush. Remove almost all the paint from the brush using a paper towel. Then gently dry brush all the pieces. This will make the details pop out and create a very interesting sense of depth. Alright, let's start placing some elements in the market stalls. I'm bringing back some books I made a while ago. They are Wylock style, so you can check out his videos to see how he makes them. I just needed to paint the edges with a bit of bone white. Now, using PVA glue and a pair of tweezers, I will patiently glue the elements in place. The quill was made using a bed and some feather-shaped jewelry pieces. The bottles are plastic beds with a toothpick. There's a short video on this channel about making potions. I also added a few scrolls, which are just roll-up paper with a drop of hot glue to mimic a wax seal. Now let's make a small bakery. For the bread I used polymer clay. I shaped baguettes and round loaves using small balls and flattened rolls. Then add some lines with a sculpting tool. I bake them according to the manufacturer's instructions and let them cool. For the color, I applied a brown wash directly, which gave a very convincing effect. Finally, I glued them onto the contour with a bit of adhesive, and that's it. Once it dried, I touch up the bright edges with a bit more brown wash, but I will leave that up to you depending on the look you want. I also want a small food stall. I painted a plastic toy plate and glued on a Wylock-style chicken, following his Tabber video. It's made from a plastic-coated paperclip with a drop of hot glue on the tip. Then I used a button with an interesting shape to recreate a pie or pastry. I also had a metal pendant piece shaped like a plate with a cake on it. I cut off the loop and painted it. I glued everything together with PVA glue, and with these three elements I think this stall is more than complete. Okay, time to make the biggest stall. I will mainly fill it with food-related items, starting with some fish. I had these metal ones I bought on AliExpress. I spray painted them and gave them a blue overbrush. Then I placed them in some crates I had left over from the modular farm terrain video. Next, I used some PVA glue to attach them beside the counter. Now I'm adding vegetable crates that my partner and I made in the farm terrain video. You can check it out here. I also placed a small barrel on some foam pieces. I painted everything in wood tones and set it next to some beds that look like beer mugs. Then I added a scale, also from AliExpress, along with several pumpkins and apples that we made with polymer clay. Finally, I prepared a small tray with bread and pastries, placed it in position and later applied a bit more brown wash to enhance the color. Alright, this will be a small stall for miscellaneous items, so I glued on some beads I had in my beads box along with some potions I make from beds. I also had this small toy horse, so I cut off the loop, sanded it down a bit and placed it in the stall. Finally, I added some extra details like a teapot and some playing cards made from small painted cardboard rectangles. As you can see, simply gluing different elements together can create some really fun and interesting results. I had some 3D printed pieces that were gifted to me a while ago, so I painted them for the occasion. This way, one of the stalls will look like it belongs to a potter. To be honest, this one was really quick to put together. Now that we have all the stalls, let's put up the canopies before moving on to the accessory details. For this, I let several wet wipes dry completely. These are more durable than kitchen or toilet paper and have almost no texture, making them ideal. I cut them to size and then use a permanent maker to draw several evenly spaced lines. Next, it was just a matter of applying the colors I wanted. I painted each one in a different color combined with white. This way, the stalls looked distinct but still had a sense of cohesion. By the way, be sure to paint both sides for extra clean finish. Once dry, we will prepare some watered down PVA glue. Using a brush, we will completely soak the canopy. Carefully, we will place it in position, and with the help of a brush and our fingers, we will start shaping it. The idea is that the wooden beams should protrude slightly, so we will gently press and winkle the fabric until we achieve a natural and believable shape. Once we are happy with the result, we will let it dry completely for a full day. The glue will harden the canopy and attach it to the wooden structure. And with that, our stalls will be finished. Alright, now let's move on to the accessories. We will start with the meat. First, we will paint the pieces with a dark red, though I like to let a bit of black show through as always. Next, we will paint the bone with its corresponding color, and although I didn't record it, I used the same color slightly diluted to paint the inner bone and the fat strands on the meat slices. Finally, I applied a red dry brush. I also painted one side of the knife. Once everything was ready, I glued it to the table with a bit of PVA glue. To finish, I applied two washes, one black to reduce color saturation and one brown to add more tone variation to the meat. Lastly, I covered the table with blood to give it a more exaggerated and disgusting look. I'm super happy with this piece, so thanks again to Broken Terrain for the idea. For the card, I glued cumin seeds using PVA glue. Once the glue base layer dried, I applied another layer of diluted glue to ensure everything was well secured. Finally, I applied a black wash, and although you don't see it in the video, I finished with a very light dry brush of buttermilk to enhance the textures. Now the weapon counter. I painted some axes I had from AliExpress, a baton as a shield, and an orc shield from the Lord of the Rings. As always, a drop of PVA glue and we secure the pieces in their corresponding place. For the tilted boxes, I glued black peppercorns using PVA glue. I did this for both sides compartments. I painted one side with dark red and the other with green. Then applied dry brushes of the same colors but in lighter shades to make the textures pop out. Finally, I used some zucchinis made with polymeric clay. You can also see this in the modular farm terrain video I mentioned earlier. And with this, everything is ready.
And there you have it, a market full of life and detail, ready to bring more character to your tabletop world. If you want free adventures and maps, check out my itch.io page. There's plenty of content to inspire your next gaming night. And if you want to share your own builds or get crafting tips, join the HANDCRAFTED Discord. I'm trying to build an awesome community of creators there. Thanks for watching, stay creative, and I will see you in the next one.